Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, you guys thought that I was working away and wouldn't be able to record videos. Not true. I've got everything set up and ready to rumble. So hopefully the audio is coming through relatively clear. I am using a much more cut down Audio-Technica mic than I usually use. But that being said, let's have a look at these Manifesto changes for curses. So, obviously I've been at work all day and I saw this come out, had a quick read through, and I've had a good read through now. My overall take on this is, I don't think this is a nerf. I know some people will probably be like, hey, this is another nerf. I don't believe that this is the case. And sort of reading through some like really high level things. So hidden monster penalties against curses have been removed. So, you know, they do have like hidden buffs or debuffs on enemies, if you want to call it that, that allow you to be less effective. Hence, when you use like Path of Building, you tick like Pinnacle Boss and, you know, your damage rates change. So they're scaling down hexes from what I can see here, but increasing the effect of the hex on enemies, taking away enemies' resistances to hexes, if you want to call it that, which I'm all for, and it's just raw one in, one out effect, which, you know, I find to be a much more simplistic approach to game design in this case, and I think it's a good change. Hexes are now stronger against unique monsters, twice as strong against pinnacle bosses, but are weak against regular monsters. I don't have any issues with that. I think that that's really good. We can pretty much clear, you know, regular packs as it stands, and having that increased effect of hexes and potentially marks on enemies is going to give you much more sort of damage output, and it's going to make it much more fruitful. Mainly for the way that I'm looking at this is less so about damage and more about defense, and I'll talk about that as I go down further. Doom mechanics being removed. I didn't really like Doom as a mechanic. I thought it was pretty shit, and tried to play a Hex Blast character, just found it really tedious to work with. So yeah, I don't find this to be a bad change. Occultist ascendancy has had some stats removed and moved around. So I don't think that this is a nerf per se, and I'll explain why when we go down. This one I really like. Enfeeble and Temporal Chains have been buffed. So one thing that I took from the Infinite Delve League is Enfeeble is a really good damage reduction skill. And I actually think, like, as opposed to running shit like Defiance Banner and Arctic Armor, running a Blasphemy Curse Aura with Enfeeble is going to be much more effective. In particular down in Delve, super effective, and potentially if the buff to Temporal Chains is really good, that means you can slow attack speed down in Delve, which means you can decrease the amount of damage you take from monsters, and its effects being scaled up for bosses. So again, really good change. And we can look at curses to more of a defensive layer, as opposed to what it has been in the past, which is an offensive ability, or, you know, a debuff ability to enemies, without a thought to decrease their defenses in the average build, which means Blasphemy is much more useful in the everyday build, and I like that because I really think Blasphemy is a cool skill. So less accessible sources of a curse effect have been removed. You know, yeah, so Hex support builds are getting a little bit of a nerf, but let's be honest, if you're a solo player, like pretty much most people who watch my channel, and most delvers, then this is of no effect to you. The high octane farmers are going to get upset and whatnot, but can't please everybody, and I don't think it's a bad change. Hex gems have been rebalanced with the goal of ensuring self-cast remains relevant. So I just don't think Hex Blast is going to be a thing moving forwards, and I don't think any of us will really miss that. We've bunched a bunch of Hex-related uniques and reworks, so we don't really know extensively what those changes are until we see the patch notes in a few days. So yeah, I think that's cool. I've got no issues, but we'll see what the effects are. And we've got new powerful uniques. So Hex Strength against monster types, without going into any crazy detail, they're basically just buffing the amount of impact hexes have on different levels of monsters. In particular, bosses is more of a focus of what they're going for with this. And again, you know, they're being transparent here. They have had hidden debuffs which have impacted player damage, and so they're removing these. And I think this is the way to really go. It reduces power creep and it balances the game much more at a flatline level, as opposed to having these complex structures that have all these interactions that, you know, get negated by changes in the game further down the track, and this could be a way of simplifying the game mechanics down to deal with power creep and whatever else. I don't think this is a bad effect. Doesn't really affect the player. If anything, it's a pure buff to the player, which is great. It gives you the benefit. It gives you an incentive to run curses and auras, curse auras. So Doom mechanic. So Doom used to be like a self-cast hex stacking sort of thing. To be honest with you, I looked at it like once or twice over the years, and it seemed cool, but not really a heavily played build as far as I'm aware. It's like no hex self-cast Doom hex bloody build ever became like heavily meta, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong. So I don't think this is a crazily bad change. I think some people will get upset about this, but I don't think this is a bad change. In the effort of simplifying the game, I think this is good. And if they scale out the Hex Blast skill and make it work as a castable spell without having that Doom scaling, then, you know, I don't think it's bad at all. It sort of is what it is, and I'm not going to throw shit at that. Curse-related uniques. So we're getting some new uniques here. So in particular, power charge stacking with curse spells. This could be really cool. I don't know what we're going to use this for yet, but it could be really cool. We've got Heretic's Veil, which has been buffed. So +2 from +1, and also 30% increased reservation efficiency. So, you know, you can fundamentally roll more curses, technically, if you've got the right reservation reduction on your, you know, curse aura bot or curse bot or whatever, you know, or curse support, sorry. So, you know, there is that. So there's a little bit of a buffage in the itemization. Ensuring self-cast is powerful. So they're just rescaling self-cast to make Hex Blast work fundamentally. Yeah, this really won't affect most of us, to be honest with you. Most of us don't play these types of skills. And sorry, this is more so talking about, this is actually talking about self-casting curses and hexes. So, Hex Touch applying hexes automatically should either come at a much higher cost or be less effective. Okay, so they're just talking about running like blasphemy versus hexing yourself. I don't really have an issue with this. They can do whatever they want. Like if they want, I know they have now put a debuff or a damage reduction down to running things like, you know, blasphemy, which is fine. That scales out the damage, and, you know, self-casting curses isn't necessarily a bad thing. It does add a little bit more complexity to boss encounters, but, you know, I find that this isn't a bad change. Like if you want to run auto-procking skills, because if you're like me, you're lazy as fuck and you just want 2-button builds, then you know, that's the price. Less damage, but potentially, you know, much more ease of play, whereas some people want to be like high octane, click 20 million buttons, and, you know, this caters to them. So, you know, they get more benefit of being more proactive in their gameplay, and I don't think that should be penalized. I don't see it as a nerf. Hex skill gem scaling. So they're rescaling the way the hex skill gems work to deal with the change in the fact that they're stripping away the resistance from enemies to negate hex effects. So fundamentally, you're not going to get as much power at the top end of a gem scaling up as what you previously could, but the effect will be negated by the fact that, you know, or that decrease in effect will be negated by the fact that the enemy will not be able to penetrate that layer of, you know, or that they won't be able to dodge out and, you know, stop your hexes from being effective. So, you know, that's a much better outcome for versing pinnacle bosses where your hexes actually matter, whereas previously they didn't mean shit. So I don't think this is a bad change, and this is just talking about the scaling curse effect. So just reading here, yeah, this is just talking about support characters. I don't really care too much about that. Occultist ascendancy. Now this is the interesting one. So 15% increased effect of your curses and enemies have maledictions being taken out of the tree, at the ascendancy tree, or it's being changed, and maledictions being added as a notable in the canon. From the malediction notable. And now it's just going to be a notable being your hexes can affect hex-proof enemies, and they're going to add malediction to the actual skill tree itself, so anybody can roll out with malediction. This nerfs occultist builds in a slight degree, but I don't think it's going to be too bad. Like generally, if you're running this when you're playing like Vortex, and I'll be playing Vortex Occultist this league, this isn't like, oh, now this makes the build unplayable. It's still friggin' powerful. The main reason why you want it is so you can pretty much proc your Profane Bloom without having to do diddly squat. So you're still going to be able to do that. You're just going to lose a little bit of damage because you're no longer going to have malediction unless you spec it in the tree. So that means that for this patch, we're most likely going to have some tree changes, which I don't think is bad. And that's more, and what I would probably say is where it's got that Doom node in the top of the tree as one of the keystone notable points in the actual tree itself, I would say that that's going to be malediction moving forwards, because that makes sense. Because if they're going to take Doom out of the game, they're going to take the Doom nodes off the tree and replace it with malediction. So it's like 1 point to allocate. We can just drop ES by 1 point or whatever. I take 6% ES off or whatever. And that's easily comparable. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, the occultist is fucked now. No, I don't think for a second it's going to be screwed. I think it's going to be pretty good actually. And now we sort of get the option to go, hey, we could go those notables, or we could take the ES notables and be even tankier. I actually think that with this I can make the Vortex Occultist, I'm going to release a video on after the patch notes once I know what the changes are. I think I can make it almost unkillable now because of this and because of the changes to Enfeeble and Temporal Chains, which is what we get to next. So this is my favorite one. So you're going to get twice as much action speed reduction on bosses and pinnacle bosses, which is really good. That's going to be the difference between dying and not dying in some circumstances. And so, yeah, Temporal Chains and Enfeeble are more so defensive layer skills or defensive layer hexes, and I will most likely be running these as opposed to like Frostbite or whatever it is, and Elemental Weakness moving forwards, because these are going to be much better at damage reduction. In particular, because I play Delve, this is going to be fantastic running either Temporal Chains or Enfeeble and Delve, and like Frostbite as a second aura to proc Profane Bloom and get the damage increase that you get on the Occultist Ascendancy. I think the way of looking at it is using curses as the new Defiance banner moving forwards, and potentially the new Determination depending on certain builds. Could be the better way of looking at curses. So it's 2 sockets, 2 gem sockets, but you don't have to run high armor based characters because you can curse enemies to make them weaker, and that's going to have much more effect on bosses and so on. So it creates a new damage layer or defense layer, and I think that this is going to open us up to better equipping builds without having to armor stack moving forwards and have, you know, every defensive skill and aura under the sun. We just run like, you know, a really good curse or a couple of curses and then scale that down, and that should be really, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it can be worked into most builds. Vulnerability and Despair, never really cared too much for these two, but they are making some changes. You know, soon to be seen as to whether or not melee's changed, because it may be the case where with melee builds it might be worth running vulnerability. And having 2 curses, a defensive curse and an offensive curse, and that might be a better scaling factor than Pride, for example, potentially. Depends on the type of build you're playing. But we'll see what this looks like when the patch notes come out, so I'm not going to make any comments here. Hex Blast, this is just going to get scaled up natively because they're removing Doom anyway, so this will just natively work like any other spellcast skill. It actually might mean that it's much more approachable to most players moving forwards, and so it might actually be a skill that we can easily equip and actually make really workable, and potentially this could be a diamond in the rough where we think it's a nerf and actually it makes it easier to play, so it makes it a meta, for example, and we'll see what the effects of that are when the patch notes come out. Conclusion, yeah, okay, we'll summon this up. The general consensus from everybody here, yeah, you get the occasional, hey, this is a nerf and yada yada. I don't think it's a bad change. I think overall the changes they're making this league is actually pretty good. I haven't yet seen a really shit change, and I'm pretty happy with the direction they're going in. Anyway, got another video coming out later. Interestingly, there's a build I really want to play as a second build, and I was playing with it the other night, and I'll show you guys in the next video, and I'll be putting that out tonight as well. But yeah, don't forget to like and sub to the channel, follow the Twitch. I've been told I don't have a closing on my videos like other people do, or a exit segue, so if anyone's got any comments about whether or not I should close my videos off in a different way or whatever, all ears. The Discord channel's sort of ripped me on that, so all open to suggestions. Anyway, until next time, have a good one, and bye.